be in it if you don't want to be. Thanks for coming. Winter General Meeting is happening this Saturday in Cardiff and online. If you haven't signed up yet, then you still can, for free. Of course, we've got an access fund. If you are looking to come in person and need potential support with travel or accommodation, if we could put the link to the sign up form in the chat in a minute, that would be great. I can't whilst I'm sharing my screen, but it will be there. Essentially, we have two general meetings each year, one in the summer, which is our annual general meeting, and the other, which is this one, winter general meeting. Up until last year, this was called autumn general meeting, but it kind of made sense to put it in the winter, so it was further away from the summer one we did. And the autumn general meeting used to just consist of an accountability session, which we'll get onto in a minute. Now, a winter general meeting encompasses all of the functions of the annual general meeting we have, but just on a smaller scale. So essentially, it's one day instead of 2 days. All the same motions can be proposed, but submission and things like that are halved. So you have 2 weeks to submit a report rather than 4 weeks, things like that. None of that is really important unless you are organizing it, but good to contextualize. So happening this Saturday, starting in the morning, the full timetable will be coming out in the next couple of days, just finalizing the exact schedule. First winter general meeting in Cardiff, first event we've had in Wales for a few years, which is pretty cool. If you've signed up, then you'll already have a Zoom link coming to you if you're attending virtually. And all events have been made compulsory hybrid as of last year, I think. So every general meeting we have, unless there are major unusual circumstances like another pandemic, are going to be hybrid. So a general meeting is your chance as members of the Young Greens to kind of set our agenda and also hold our elected committees to account. So if you don't know, we have two major committees in the Young Greens, the Executive Committee and the Democracy and Accountability Committee. The executive is kind of in charge of the day-to-day running of the Young Greens. We have an admin staff member, we have two co-chairs, and a committee with various roles, including elections officer, campaigns, liberation officers like people of color, women's officer, etc. And the Democracy and Accountability Committee is kind of the boring one, which I chair. It's not boring, but on paper it's boring. So we do things like running the democracy side of the general meetings, coordinating our internal elections, which happen every year in the summer, and compiling reports of both of the committees. There's also a Green Students Committee, which is kind of a subset of the executive. The two chairs of the Students Committee sit on the executive committee, and then they co-opt new members. So there's lots of opportunities to get involved if you haven't yet already. So in terms of what we'll be doing, each member of the executive committee and the democracy committee write a report outlining what they've done since being elected in the summer. Those are all available on the discuss.green website already, which you will have received a link to. And if you haven't already, we can put another one in the chat. These reports, as well as a technical report from the Democracy Committee, can be scrutinized. You have a chance to ask any member of any committee what they've been doing. If you think they've been doing something bad, then this is your opportunity to have a nice, polite go at them, criticize them, ask why they've done certain things the way they have. So we'll have a Q&A as we go through each of the reports. The committee report that we do will also outline rulings we've made based on requests members have made relating to the Constitution and the standing orders, which are the main ruling committees we have in the party. So motions are the other big thing. So we have multiple policy documents in the Young Greens. There's a record of policy statements, a record of organizational statements, and a record of structural procedures. And those first two, the organizational statements and the policy statements, relates to things which any member can propose. If you want the Young Greens to campaign to abolish, looking for something in my room, abolish scissors, then that would go into the policy statements. It can be anything, ideally not scissor related and more relevant to the Green Party, but yeah, you get the idea. Organizational statements are then related to the internal organization of the party. Definitions of different forms of discrimination are in there, for example. There's advice about accessibility in the party. And these are things which you can't submit now if you haven't already for this winter general meeting because the deadline was last week. But if you attend on Saturday, you'll be able to vote on them. We currently have 10 motions proposed and 6 amendments, and I'll get onto amendments in a moment. Other thing on this screen mentions motions of censure and commendation. These are essentially motions which anybody can propose if they think a member of either of the committees has done something particularly great or particularly awful. You can propose an official motion to commend them or censure them. A censure is like a formal criticism or warning, if you like. Currently, that doesn't entail any further disciplinary action. So they're not going to get kicked out of the party if you propose a motion of this sort. But it's a nice way to formally note down work which different members of our committees have done. So the motions we've just been speaking about have different rules in terms of how many people need to vote for them to pass. So first thing is that each session we have at the general meeting has a quoracy. A quoracy is a minimum number of members which need to be present for things to be legitimate. That current number is 25. So as long as there are 25 members there at any given time, we can proceed and vote for things. And then things we vote for will end up as policy. If we had like 5 people there, we could still vote, but none of it would mean anything. So please come. We do get over 25 all the time, so that's fine. The amendments, because they relate to the Constitution, which is kind of the biggest document and organizes what the Young Greens actually are, it's harder to pass an amendment to that than it is to introduce a new policy. So a 2/3 majority is needed for an amendment as opposed to a simple majority for policy statements and censures and commendations. The other one listed on the left-hand side is resolutions, which is similar to a policy statement, but is more of an immediate request or demand that the executive committee campaigns on a particular issue for the upcoming term. So you might want the monarchy, for example, was a big issue in the last few months. Some people may propose there's motions related to that. You might say, for example, I want the executive committee of the Young Greens to run a campaign on the monarchy or whatever. But as of now, for this general meeting, no resolutions have been submitted. So we have to wait until the summer to get to see how those kind of things work. Plenary. This is basically the time we spend at the general meeting debating policies and motions. Plenaries are run by the Democracy Committee. There'll be a chair and a deputy chair of each session. And whether you're attending in person or online, you can still participate equally and vote and speak and things like that. So first note is there is a prioritization ballot, basically because we don't have unlimited time, it's a tight schedule, and because there are lots of motions, it's important to determine which motions members think are most or least important. So in the morning, everybody who signed up will be emailed a link to a voting platform, and they'll have a list of the motions there and the list of the amendments, and you can rank them in order based on what you think is most important. In practice, most of the time we get through all of the motions anyway. So even if you submitted a motion and it's at the bottom of the pile, in all likelihood, it's going to be heard nonetheless. This year there seem to be more motions than usual. So it's possible you could submit something really niche, not many members think it's important, and therefore that would be at the bottom of the prioritization ballot. Debating pairs. So when a debate happens, it's important that we don't have like 100 members speaking in favor of something and then nobody speaking against. So an amendment to the standing orders was introduced last year to ensure basically after the proposer of a motion has introduced it and given a primary speech in favor, any subsequent debate on that specific motion is done in pairs. So if somebody's speaking, wants to speak against, we need to make sure there's somebody else who wants to speak in favor. That could mean if nobody wants to speak against the motion, for example, if it seems like it's going to have unanimous support, then there wouldn't be really a debate on that because there would be no need to. If it's a more controversial debate, you could have up to 4 or 5 pairs of debates. It could go on for quite a while, and then any member attending can speak in favor or against the motion. You can put your hand up. The chair of the debate will say, would anybody like to speak in favor? You put your hand up, and if you're chosen, you'll have usually up to 2 minutes to speak in favor or against, depending on how much time we have left. If we've been going on for a while, if there's a really controversial motion and there's been a debate, there'll be loads and loads of pairs of speeches in favor and against. The proposer of the motion will then have a right of reply if they want it, so they can finish the debate by giving a summary of what they've heard and asking you, telling you why they think you should still vote for the motion. Then we'll vote. If you're in person, you're going to have a voting card, which is like the one that guy's arm is waving around on the screen. If you're online, we'll have a Zoom poll probably, and then we'll collate the results together, and you'll find out the results immediately, so you don't have to wait until the end of the day or something. If there's an amendment to a specific motion, so because when people submit motions, other people can then submit amendments online. Within the motions, they might like the motion as a whole, but then think this bit maybe should be changed. When there's an amendment, you debate the amendment first, and then we vote on the amendment, and then we vote on the motion as a whole, as amended. You have to do it that way around, because otherwise, if you vote on the motion first, then you go on to the amendment. Depending on what happens to the amendment, some people may then not actually want the motion as a whole to pass. So I know there's at least one motion submitted where there's an amendment. So we'll start on that. The proposer of the amendment will say, here's what I want to do to change this motion. Whether or not that amendment passes, we'll then go on to debate the rest of the motion as it is, as a finalized whole. When we're almost done, I'm going to go back before we do questions. A couple of things we didn't add to the presentation, but you might hear strange words like procedural motion, point of information, point of clarification, and things like that in the debate. So at any point, if you're confused or you think that we should be debating a motion in a different way, then you can put your hand up and say point of information or procedural motion. And if the chair allows you to speak, which they almost certainly will, then you can do one of a few things. Let's say there's a really, really big motion about like updating the entire way the party works. And there are a few sections which you like, and there are other sections which are a bit more messy and could do with some more work. You can propose to take a motion in parts. So you might say, actually, this motion is too big for us to vote on as a whole. I think we should debate section A on its own, and section B and C we should do afterwards. And then we might have a debate about whether to take it in parts. If that goes ahead, then we'll then split the motion into 2 or 3 or however many, and go on as we would then normally. So you could end up voting in favor of one part of a motion and then rejecting another part of it. That's an important thing to keep in mind. And if you're attending, then there'll be a reminder and an explainer before each session on Saturday. Another thing you can do is request a minor textual amendment. Basically, on the floor when you're there, that's not the time to suggest big amendments to a motion, because that should have been done before the general meeting is taking place. Nonetheless, if there are some minor grammatical errors, for example, then that is your opportunity to put your hand up and say, can we just change this? it generally requires the proposer of the motion to agree that your suggestion is friendly. So you can't say, can I change this word from good to bad, because that changes the meaning of the motion. It's too substantial to qualify as a minor amendment. But those are two things you can do during the debate to change a motion if you think that it should be changed. Textual amendment and taking it in parts. You'll also be given in person an inclusion card. So at any point, if you feel that we are failing on accessibility, or if you have a question relating to any feelings of uncomfortability or discrimination, then you can put your inclusion card up. Actually, I think I have some with me. I can show you what I'm talking about. But I'm sharing my screen anyway, I just realized. I'll show you in a minute. Anyway, that's another thing you can do, inclusion cards. It will all be explained and make more sense when I'm not sharing my screen. I think that's almost it. Also important to bear in mind that we won't be spending the entire day on Saturday debating motions. There are other sessions which will be taking place, which will be confirmed in the next couple of days. Speakers from the party, as well as more interactive sessions, which you can take part in online or in person. It's a really fun day. It's only one day. It's really busy, but it's very productive, and we can create a lot of change within the party and improve our structures and our procedures and update our policy, which often needs to happen, which is really fun. So I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and see if anybody has questions. This is an inclusion card, by the way. Everyone will have one of them. If you're online, then you can message a member of the Democracy Committee and make a request based on the same thing. You just won't have one of these yellow pieces of paper sent to you. So does anybody have any questions or comments or anything they are confused about? Has everybody signed up for Winter General Meeting? I can see some head shaking. I can see some thumbs up. Please do. Yeah, you don't. If you feel like you have not got engaged enough in the party or whatever to fully contribute, I would say please come anyway. By signing up, you're doing more than most members will do at any given time, right? The fact you've come here today means that you are evidently very dedicated to the party. It's a really fun and easy way to get involved. If you feel like you don't want to speak in a debate or something, that's fine. Loads of people don't. You can still take part. You can still vote. It's important not to feel like you are out of your depth or whatever. Like most people are very new to the party. We are the youth wing after all. So please join up. If you haven't already, in the chat, I can see it now. There's a sign up form and a link to the democracy platform, which is where all of the motions and amendments are stored. And you can go and look at them now. The deadline for amendments has passed, but you can still comment on them. If you haven't logged in before, you have to make a quick account, but that's very easy to do. Doesn't look like there's any questions. In which case we can finish early. Thank you for coming. I will see you all on Saturday, online or in person in Cardiff. Thank you for coming. And if you do have any questions afterwards, which you didn't want to ask now, I'll put in our email address in the chat. There you go. In which case, I don't think there's anything else to mention right now. Thanks for coming. You can all have a good evening and not have to listen to me anymore. Thank you. Woo. All right, we can